Hi, folks. My name is Dennison Bertram. I recently wound down a company that I had built for about the past 6 years. And since then, I've been spending a lot of my time thinking about the future of how we build corporations, how we build businesses, and really how AI is going to affect the future. Something that is really come up to me lately because I am in the process of searching for schools for my young kids was the idea that maybe AI is going to make standardized testing irrelevant in the future. And this idea sort of came to me when I was on a school tour recently at a public school here in New York City that is very high standardized test scores, very high math and science testing as well as reading. And this is something that the school touts really highly as, their sort of like, why parents want to go there, why they're so successful. And indeed, they're very desirable. And I too am deeply desirable of my children getting into this school and being able to study there, especially because it's a public school. But on the tour, something kind of occurred to me. There was a moment when they talked about how they had downsized some of their art classes to make room for expansion of the school and how they were using technology to help students use these adaptive tests to really be scoring so well in these standardized test scores. I started to wonder myself whether or not the optimization function of schools that has historically really been, especially for the past 30 years or so, around STEM, around, really science and technology and math, whether this actually still applied, right? If this is still actually the right way to be thinking about education. As a parent, you worry about a lot of things. You worry about the future, how you prepare your kids for that future, and if you're doing the right thing. And up until recently, it was a pretty easy mental shortcut to make of good test scores equals good school. And the two things you didn't really have to question any further. Now, however, I am questioning this. And, a lot of people have sort of taken to my hot take to say, like, that's crazy. Of course, math and science skills will always be important and we should keep testing for them. And I'm not actually debating that. Like, I think it's so ingrained in us as math and science testing and scoring as being so important that it almost seems ludicrous to say maybe it's not important. But I think I have to ask the question. Maybe it's not important. And what I take from this is, well, first, maybe a little bit of a story. When I was a kid, when I was young and first entered public schools when in the first grade, I had horrible handwriting. And this was a problem for me. And the teachers would note that I had terrible handwriting. But my teacher at the time spoke with my mother, and my teacher was just really so far ahead for a first grade teacher. And she said to my mother, do not worry about Dennison's handwriting because in the future, no one is going to handwrite and it's going to be totally irrelevant. So, what you'd be better off doing is rather than trying to like drive him crazy and learning how to, handwrite nicely, you should just get him a typewriter and teach him how to touch type. And that's what my mom did. She taught me how to touch type. And I was a fluent touch typer, really high speed at a really young age. And I've also had a computer all my life. And the funny thing is, the world that my first grade teacher imagined, which was a world in which we wouldn't handwrite anything anymore, came true. Handwriting is absolutely obsolete. I haven't written a letter to someone in probably 20 years. And this stands out to me because I think about now AI and math and science. And what we created is this super intelligence that, I have small children. So when my children go to school, we're talking about like a decade and a half, 2 decades of advancements in AI and in thinking machines and super intelligence. That world is going to be so vastly different. It's hard for me to know or understand if any of the things that we are doing now really are going to make a difference then. And I start to think about it in the sense of what is school for? What are these tests for? And what they are is a kind of optimization function. And school has been this kind of optimization function. When you look at when Andrew Carnegie established the public library system here in America, and when the public schools were established here in America, the goal here was to create educated individuals who were ready to go work on the assembly line, to were ready to go work in the factories. Because these early industrialists, these industrial barons, they couldn't grow their business without educated, competent, knowledgeable humans to operate things, because these were, especially at the time, advanced machinery. They needed you to know math, they needed you to know physics, they needed you to know science, in order to enable economic capitalist growth, right? This was a big core piece of success. For the economy to grow, we had to have educated individuals who were participating in the economy. Now, however, that seems to be called into question because there isn't, or it's, I should say, it's hard to imagine at our current pace a world where a human being's understanding of math or science is going to possibly be competitive to um, the hyper intelligence understanding of math and science. And all these jobs that for the past, 20 years that have been so the high paying white collar jobs that were the result of high standardized tests, getting into great schools, performing well in the sort of STEM subjects, these jobs are going away or will go away in some large part, most likely, to hyperintelligence, right? Superintelligence that's available as, a faucet. You just turn on, you need more intelligence, you get more intelligence. So we're optimizing for something that might not really exist as a need anymore. You can imagine with like horse and buggies, right? Like people learned how to drive horse and buggies. It was obvious the world was filled with horse and buggies. You would definitely have a good living, a good job if you learned how to ride horses really well and drive horse and buggies really well. But then that world disappeared and it just didn't matter. And this change has happened for everything. At one point in time, you needed to know how to do basic healings or, healing in your home, right? All these sorts of like home remedies. You need to know these. And today, you don't need to know that anymore. You go to a doctor, and now people who've gone to doctors are going to ChatGPT. And I can't help but wonder that is this going to happen also with STEM, right? Will science and mathematics become something that our abstraction, this intelligence, this tool, will become so much better at that it doesn't make sense for us to do it? A sort of final note here, so this doesn't run. Currently, my kids attend a Waldorf school, and Waldorf has a very different philosophy about the world. And they are really focused on this idea of the whole child, of childhood. They talk a lot about protecting childhood and how childhood is being sort of systematically dismantled in today's society, which previously wouldn't have hit me so hard, but actually today it hits me very hard because when you look at, like, for example, the Waldorf philosophy about what kind of people they're optimizing for. They're optimizing for well adjusted humans. And when I look at this public school that we may attend, they're optimizing for leading math and science scores on exams. And while it's so obvious in the common sense to go for these high scores, for the first time in my mind, I have this serious doubt whether or not being good at math, being good at science is going to be at all relevant in the future. Maybe in the future, being a really well rounded, well balanced human is going to be vastly more valuable because maybe that human's actually going to be able to communicate to other humans, to the AI, to groups, be more socially adept in a way that's going to be actually more valuable for the future. And it's such a strange thing to think that maybe math and science aren't important because I've been a math and science person my entire life. But for the first time, I can see a world where being a math and science person isn't important anymore because we've made tools that replace humans, the necessity for the human brain to be part of that process. That's something I've been thinking about lately. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This has gone on a little bit long, so I'm going to cut it. But it really tickles my brain in a funny way where is the optimization function for schools no longer aligned with the future reality that humans are going to live in? Are we teaching our children in a way that's incompatible to the future that they're going to live in? And I think a lot of people would say yes, but they wouldn't know why they were saying yes. They just sort of like innately feel that. But I wonder if actually we're going to invert our expectations of schools and we're going to return to a world where it's actually more important to be really good at the arts. It's more important to be really creative. It's more important to be really socially skilled because the things that we have historically tested for and been academically rigorous for, math, science, maybe these things won't be relevant in the future. So let me know what you think about that. I know that's a crazy hot take. I'm sure people are going to just be like, Dennison, you're stupid. Obviously, math and science are going to matter. And yeah, maybe they will. I don't know. This is just something that I've been thinking about lately. And I'd be really interested in hearing a take, especially as I go through this process of, selecting schools for my kids and really thinking about what the future is going to be like. Because I just would not believe you if you told me that in 20 years or 15, 20 years, when my kids go to university, um, they are going to be operating in a world that looks anything like today. Anyway, my name's Dennison Bertram. I am currently a free agent and thinking about the world, and I'd love to hear from you.